Gustav Sorge was born on the 24th of April 1911 in the Runikin district of Silesia, which is today Rojęcin in Poland. It is located about halfway between Leszno and Rawicz. His father Ernst was a farm labourer, whilst his mother was an assistant in a gardening shop. He had a brother and a sister. The brother was killed in the Second World War. Sorge grew up with his maternal grandparents who owned about 11.5 hectares of land. At the end of the First World War, this part of what had been Prussia was transferred to Poland. According to later court documents, in 1920 his parents were expelled because the father did not come from this region, but from the area that remained within Germany. As a result, the family moved to Osnabruck. Sorge's father worked here first as a construction worker and later as a railway foreman. However, Sorge stayed with his maternal grandparents, probably so that he would one day inherit the farm. His grandparents had 2 children. The girl was Sorge's mother, but the son, who was Sorge's uncle, was an army officer in the German army, and he felt as though he was unable to live in that land which had been transferred to Poland from Germany, even though that land was only a few hundred meters from the German national border. Sorge went to a German language elementary school in Rojęcin from 1917 to 1919. Following the transfer of the territory to Poland, there was no longer a German language school to attend, so from September 1920 he attended the Polish elementary school. As it would appear that the teachers were not locals but came from central Poland, they did not speak German. The local evangelical pastor gave him instruction in German. This gentleman was a member of the German minority in the Polish parliament. Sorge left elementary school in 1925 as one of the best of 16 to 17 students. According to his later testimony, Sorge stated that he had little hope of being able to take over the farm of his grandparents because of his German nationality. In fact, this is not the case. Article 93 of the Treaty of Versailles obliged the new Polish state to protect the ethnic minorities and their property within its borders. Nonetheless, Sorge began his apprenticeship as a blacksmith in April 1926 with an ethnic German master blacksmith in Bojanowo, which is around 3 kilometers south of Rojęcin. There were 4 people doing the apprenticeship, the other 3 being Polish speakers. Because of his German citizenship, he was only allowed to stay until the end of his apprenticeship, or so he said. In 1929, he passed his apprenticeship examination with the grade very good and then worked for a year as a machine fitter. He claimed that in 1930 he had to leave his home. He first went to his uncle Herman, his mother's brother, in Breslau, which is today Wrocław, around 100 kilometers from Rojęcin. Perhaps he did not wish to rejoin his parents because he wanted to stay closer to home, and he also had many friends in Breslau. He also had closer contact with his uncle than with his parents. In the end, however, he complied with his parents' wishes and moved to live with them in Osnabruck at the beginning of 1931. Because of the general economic crisis at the time, he could not find permanent work there. At times, he reported to the Employment Office for emergency work, but in general, until March 1933, he was mostly unemployed and dependent on unemployment benefits. In the meantime, he continued his education in courses set up by the Employment Office, in particular to improve his German language skills. To understand his mentality, we need to have a closer look at the border situation where he came from. The majority of the population in his home area were Polish speaking, and this area for that reason was transferred to Poland after the First World War. Although his father who was a German nationalist, did not exert much influence on him because of the geographical separation. The influence of the pastor, his teacher, and above all, that of his uncle, who repeatedly pointed to the former size of Germany, was all the stronger. The teacher, who was also the chairman of the German minority group in the Boyanovo area, treated him as his own son. The uncle in Breslau drilled into him during his frequent visits that he was German. He had been an army officer during the First World War and was unable to adapt himself to life outside the military. He was in contact with the Black Reichswehr, a sort of secret army founded by the German army to get around the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles and which assisted other paramilitary organizations, particularly in the border fighting with Poles. His uncle also joined the Nazi Party at an early age and was local group leader in Breslau from 1930. Under the influence of his uncle, Sorge tried to be employed by the Reichswehr in 1930, but was turned away, allegedly because of his insufficient knowledge of the German language. Thanks to his uncle's mediation, however, he was able to join the Black Reichswehr from January 1931. He took part in theoretical and practical military training once a week in a barracks in Osnabruck, and in July 1931 on a 4-week exercise at the Sennelager military exercise area near Paderborn, and took part in another similar exercise in nearby Höxter in September 1932. He joined the NSDAP, the Nazi Party, and the SS in January 1931. According to him, the decisive factor in joining the SS was that a large proportion of the participants in the military exercises were SS members. He was a member of the SS group in Osnabruck, which before 1933 had around 60 to 70 men. In the political disputes in 1931 to 1932, it fought in street battles, mainly with members of the Red Front Fighters League. It seems it was here that he was given the nickname Iron Gustav. The reason for this naming was his participation in a street battle in Nordhorn, some 50 kilometers to the west of Osnabrück, in the summer of 1932 with members of the Red Front Fighters League. He said that he jumped out of a truck and waded into a group of communists whilst wielding a club. When Hitler came to power on the 30th of January 1933, Sorge said that he did not get involved in the celebrations and have initially not known anything about the imprisonment of political opponents. On the 1st of May 1933, the Nazis held a celebration of the workers' holiday, and even trade union leaders who had opposed Hitler joined in. The Nazis showed how much they appreciated that support the following day when they outlawed organised labour. Sorge was present when the trade union building in Osnabrück was raided and he saw the officials being arrested. It did not bother him, of course. He believed that the trade unionists were criminals who should be brought to justice. Sorge first learned about the concentration camps in the summer of 1933. At that time, there was a concentration camp in Estewegen in the Emsland near the Dutch border. The SA guards from there came to Osnabrück on leave. From them, Sorge heard that there were members of dissolved left-wing parties in the camps. Of course, the existence of the concentration camps was no secret, and in particular this one. It was openly discussed, particularly after a sermon by the Bishop of Osnabrück, and when Prussian Prime Minister Hermann Goering gave a Christmas amnesty and ordered that it be closed down. As early as the summer of 1934, the concentration camps in Emsland were set up again under the name of Justislager, justice camps. The guard was provided by SA men from the Osnabrück district in police uniform, but with the rank badges of the judiciary. At the time, Sorge was still at his regular job. In March 1933, he got a job as a locksmith in a weaving and spinning mill, and after a month switched to the Osnabruck copper and wire works, where he stayed until September 1934. He continued to perform his role in the SS in his spare time, and in September 1934 received the rank of Unterscharführer. Due to a decree of the Prussian Minister of the Interior about the reinforcement of the police with national auxiliaries, he had to give up his job and was called up to the Guard Command of the Estewegen concentration camp on the 1st of October 1934. There were then around 300 guards. He retained his rank and was used to guard the prisoners in the camp and at their workplaces.